The desert was quiet that morning, too quiet. Not even the wind stirred the dunes, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Éloi trudged across the golden sand with his leather canteen bouncing at his side, his boots sinking with every step. The sun had only begun to rise, but already its rays painted the horizon with fire. He was searching for nothing in particular, only walking, chasing the strange pull he felt inside his chest. For weeks, he had wandered near the village of Aravel, convinced there was something hidden beyond the endless dunes. He could not explain it to anyone, not even to his stepmother, Séraphine. She laughed when he told her, but she also touched his shoulder softly, as if she too sensed that his path was leading him toward something unusual. Éloi paused on a ridge of sand, lifting a hand to shield his eyes. The horizon shimmered with waves of heat, the kind that often tricked travelers with mirages. But this felt different. His heart beat faster, not from exhaustion, but from a quiet excitement rising inside him. He thought he heard something faint, like a melody carried by the wind. He turned his head. Nothing. Only sand stretching forever. Yet, in that silence, he swore he could hear water. His boots carried him down the slope, crunching softly. He breathed deep, tasting the dry air. It scratched his throat, but the sound in the distance urged him forward. He imagined a stream, a spring, or maybe the echo of birds. But birds never came this far out into the desert. His fingers brushed against the worn strap of his satchel, his only companion. A breeze suddenly stirred, whispering past his ears. For the first time he felt the desert was alive. Hours passed as he followed that sound. The sun climbed higher, turning the sand white-hot, but Éloi pressed on. He thought of Séraphine's smile, of the way she always believed the desert carried secrets, if only one was willing to listen. Her words echoed now, "Not everything hidden wishes to stay hidden, Éloi. Some secrets are waiting to be found by those who walk with open hearts." He let those words guide him. His lips cracked from thirst, yet he refused to turn back. Something was waiting ahead. Something was calling him by name, though no voice spoke aloud. At last he reached the bottom of a canyon he had never seen before. Jagged rocks rose high on either side, forming a path that cut through the desert like a forgotten scar. Shadows cooled the ground, offering him relief. The sound of water grew louder, no longer a dream. Eloi's pulse quickened. He ran forward, stumbling over stones until the canyon widened. What he saw stopped him in his tracks. Before him stretched a grove of palms swaying gently, their green crowns heavy with fruit. A stream glittered in the sunlight, winding through a meadow of flowers that had no right to exist here, in the middle of endless dust. It was impossible, yet it was real. Éloi had found a paradise. He stood frozen at the edge, his breath caught in his chest. The air smelled sweet, like honey mixed with wild herbs. He dropped to his knees, scooped water from the stream, and let it cool his cracked lips. It tasted purer than anything he had ever known, fresh as if it came from the heavens themselves. A laugh escaped him, shaky and breathless. He was not dreaming. This place was alive, hidden within the heart of the desert, waiting for him. He looked around in awe, the garden's colors glowing brighter than jewels. For the first time in his life, Éloi felt he had stepped into a story larger than himself. Éloi stepped cautiously into the grove, afraid the vision might vanish if he moved too quickly. The air grew cooler, wrapping him like a silken cloak. Palms rustled overhead, their leaves whispering secrets he could not yet understand. Flowers bloomed in every color: violet, gold, crimson, spilling across the ground in wild patterns. Some he recognized, but others were strange, with petals that shimmered as though dusted with light. He bent low to touch one, and the soft velvet tingled against his skin as if it were alive. Éloi drew his hand back, startled but enchanted. The desert outside had been lifeless and harsh, yet here, everything pulsed with warmth and breath. He felt as though he had entered another world entirely, a world hidden from ordinary eyes. He walked deeper, each step filling him with wonder. A stream gurgled at his side, its waters so clear he could see smooth stones resting like treasures at the bottom. Tiny fish darted between them, glimmering silver in the sun. He crouched and let the water wash over his fingers, cool and steady, grounding him in this impossible dream. The scent of blossoms drifted through the air, mingled with something sweet, almost like fresh bread. Eloi's stomach growled, and he realized he had not eaten since dawn. He glanced up and saw clusters of fruit hanging from the palms, ripe and golden. They seemed to glow in the light, as though inviting him to take one. Hesitating only a moment, Éloi reached for a fruit, twisting it free from the branch. It fit perfectly in his palm, smooth and heavy with juice. He bit into it and his eyes widened. The flavor was unlike anything he had ever tasted, sweet, rich, and alive, as if sunlight itself had been captured inside. The juice ran down his chin and he laughed aloud, unable to contain his joy. For years he had known only the rough bread and salted meat of the desert, but here each bite felt like a blessing. He ate slowly, savoring the miracle, until his hunger faded into pure contentment. This was no ordinary oasis. This was a paradise meant to be discovered, and somehow, it had chosen him. Éloi stretched out on the soft grass beside the stream, staring up at the palms swaying lazily above. The breeze carried the faint sound of chimes, though he saw no instruments. He closed his eyes, letting the rhythm sink into his heart. For the first time in many seasons he felt safe. Yet, beneath the calm, questions stirred. Who planted this garden? How could it exist in such a place? And why did it feel as though it had been waiting for him? His thoughts circled, but no answers came. Only the steady hum of life around him, reassuring and strange. The garden seemed to breathe with him, every flower and leaf rising and falling in rhythm to his own chest. When Éloi finally sat up, the sun had shifted in the sky, casting long beams of gold through the canyon walls. He realized hours had passed without his notice. The paradise had captured him so completely that time itself had slipped away. He rose to his feet, brushing sand and petals from his clothes, and whispered aloud, "Séraphine must see this." The thought of his stepmother's gentle smile filled him with urgency. She had always spoken of hidden wonders in the desert, and now he had proof. But as he turned to leave, the wind rose suddenly, tugging at his cloak. The palms rustled louder, almost as though the garden itself did not want him to go. Éloi hesitated at the edge, torn between duty and the strange bond he already felt with this place. Éloi's steps back across the dunes felt lighter than air, as though he carried the garden within him. The desert heat no longer bit at his skin, and even the endless horizon seemed less cruel. He hurried home, his mind bursting with images of the palms, the shimmering stream, the taste of that golden fruit. Yet more than anything he longed to tell Séraphine. She had always been more than a stepmother to him. She was the one who guided him when his father's harshness grew heavy, the one who listened when no one else cared. If anyone could understand the wonder he had found, it would be her. The thought of her seeing the garden with her own eyes made his heart race faster than his feet. By the time Éloi reached the small stone house on the edge of Aravel, the sun had dipped low, casting the desert in shades of rose and amber. Smoke rose from the chimney, and the scent of lentils greeted him. Inside, Séraphine stood at the hearth, her auburn hair tied loosely with a strip of cloth. She turned at the sound of the door, her gray eyes warm with recognition. "Éloi," she said softly, her voice always carrying a hint of music. "You're late. Did the desert keep you again?" She smiled knowingly, as though she could see straight through him. He caught his breath, realizing she might already sense what he had discovered. "I found something," Éloi said, almost tripping over his own words. He pulled off his cloak and sat at the wooden table, leaning forward with urgency. "A place, no more than a place. It's like the desert was hiding it. Palms, a stream, flowers I've never seen. It's alive, Séraphine. I thought I was dreaming, but it was real." His hands moved as he spoke, painting pictures in the air. "You have to see it." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Séraphine stirred the pot slowly, her gaze distant. Finally, she set the spoon down and came to sit across from him, her fingers folding over his. Her touch was steady, though her eyes glistened as if holding back some secret. "Éloi," she whispered, "you must be careful. Not every paradise is meant for everyone. Some are meant only for those who listen." Her words sent a shiver through him. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You knew, didn't you?" She smiled faintly, a sad, tender curve of her lips. "I didn't know where it was, but I always believed something like it existed. The desert doesn't only take, it also gives to those who walk with patience." She squeezed his hand and let out a breath. "I hoped you would be the one to find it." Éloi's chest swelled with pride, yet confusion gnawed at him. If she had believed in such a place, why had she never searched for it herself? He wanted to ask, but her gaze silenced him. She rose, ladling stew into 2 bowls and placed one before him. The simple meal smelled richer than ever. He ate quietly, her words echoing inside his mind. Perhaps the garden was more than just a miracle, it was a trust, a secret meant to be guarded. Séraphine sat across from him, her face calm yet unreadable. As the night deepened, Éloi realized that bringing her to see the garden might not just be about sharing joy. It might reveal truths she had kept hidden all along. The morning sun spilled gold over Aravel as Éloi tightened the straps of his satchel. He had not slept much, Dreams of the garden had filled his mind with restless visions, petals glowing in moonlight, streams singing like flutes, fruit heavy with light. Séraphine moved quietly in the kitchen, watching him with knowing eyes. "You're going back," she said simply, though it was not a question. He nodded, unable to hide his urgency. "Come with me. You need to see it, Séraphine." Her lips pressed into a line, thoughtful. For a long moment she said nothing, then finally whispered, "Very well. Show me the place that has captured your heart." Relief and excitement surged through Éloi. Together they filled 2 flasks of water and set off across the dunes. The desert stretched wide and merciless, but with Séraphine at his side, Éloi felt lighter. The sand burned underfoot, the sky blazed without mercy, yet she walked with steady grace. She told him stories along the way, tales her own mother had once whispered of hidden wells and secret groves where the desert kept its treasures. Her voice was soft, carrying between the gusts of wind, making the endless journey feel shorter. Éloi listened with rapt attention, every story weaving into the belief that what he had found was no accident. Perhaps this paradise was not only for him, it was part of something older, something that stretched beyond his own understanding. Hours passed before the canyon walls rose from the earth, jagged and silent like guardians of stone. Eloi's pulse quickened as he led her down the narrow path. The air grew cooler, shadows wrapping around them. At first, the canyon seemed empty, its silence thick. Séraphine slowed her steps, doubt flickering in her eyes. "Éloi," she said softly, "are you certain?" He smiled, gripping her hand. "Wait, you'll see." They rounded a bend, and then the sight unfurled before them. The palms swayed, the stream sparkled, and the meadow glowed as though it had been waiting. Séraphine stopped in her tracks, her hand covering her mouth. A sound escaped her lips, half gasp, half sob. By the heavens, together they stepped into the grove. The fragrance of blossoms enveloped them, and birds fluttered overhead, small, bright creatures Éloi had not noticed before. He watched Séraphine carefully as she touched the bark of a palm, her fingers trembling. Tears shimmered in her eyes, though her smile was radiant. "I never thought I would see it," she whispered, her voice breaking. Éloi tilted his head. "You mean you knew?" She turned to him, her gray eyes shining with something deeper than joy. "My mother spoke of this place. She said it was a gift of the desert, hidden for those who carried both sorrow and hope. I thought it was only a story." She bent to touch the flowers, her hands reverent, her heart wide open. Eloi's chest swelled as he watched her, pride mixing with awe. The garden seemed brighter with her in it, as if acknowledging her presence. The stream's song rose sweeter, the fruit glistened more golden, the air hummed with a living energy. It was no longer just his discovery, it was theirs. For a long time they walked together among the palms, laughing, marveling, tasting the sweet fruit that left juice on their fingers. Yet beneath the joy, Éloi noticed something in Séraphine's eyes, a shadow of memory, a flicker of secrets unspoken. The paradise had awakened happiness, yes, but also something deeper. And as they sat together beneath a palm, Éloi realized the garden was not finished with them. It was only beginning to reveal its mysteries. The morning light streamed through the palms, scattering golden patches across the meadow. Éloi awoke on the soft grass beside the stream, the gentle sound of water lulling him from sleep. He blinked, surprised he had not even remembered closing his eyes. Séraphine was already awake, kneeling near a cluster of flowers, her fingers moving gently across their petals. "Éloi," she called softly, "come here." He rose and walked over, noticing how the flowers seemed to bend toward her, as if greeting an old friend. "They move," she whispered, wonder in her voice. Indeed, the blossoms shifted ever so slightly, their faces turning to follow her hands. Eloi's breath caught. It was as if the garden itself recognized her presence. They explored further that morning, and with every step, the place revealed more marvels. Birds darted between branches, their feathers painted with colors Éloi had never seen before: emerald, sapphire, and even shades that shimmered like silver flame. When he reached out his hand, one landed upon his wrist, tilting its tiny head as though studying him. The bird sang a note so pure that Eloi's heart trembled. Then it lifted off again, vanishing into the palms. He looked to Séraphine, whose eyes shone like starlight. "It knows you," she said, smiling. "This garden, it knows us both." As noon approached, they rested beneath a fig tree heavy with fruit. Éloi plucked one and split it in half, offering a piece to Séraphine. The sweetness burst across his tongue, richer even than the fruit from the palms. Yet what stunned him most was the way the tree seemed to sigh with relief as its fruit was taken, as though it had been waiting to be shared. Séraphine touched the trunk gently. "This place gives freely," she said, her voice reverent. "But it also asks for respect." Her words lingered in Éloi's mind. Could a garden feel? Could it choose who was worthy of its gifts? The thought both thrilled and unsettled him. Later, wandering along the stream, Éloi noticed something peculiar. Beneath the clear water lay stones that glowed faintly, like embers sleeping under glass. He reached in, pulling one free. It was smooth and warm, pulsing faintly as though alive. Séraphine knelt beside him, her fingers brushing the stone. "My mother spoke of these," she whispered. "She called them heartstones. They carry the memory of this place." Éloi turned it in his palm, entranced by the steady glow. For the first time he felt the garden was not merely alive, it was watching them, teaching them. The realization made his pulse race. As the sun began to set, painting the canyon in shades of violet, Éloi and Séraphine sat by the stream, heartstone glowing between them. The garden had shown them wonders beyond imagining, yet Éloi sensed this was only the beginning. He looked at Séraphine, her face softened by the fading light, and whispered, "This place is more than paradise. It's a voice, a keeper of secrets." She nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving the stone. "And now that it has spoken to us, Éloi, we must decide, do we listen or do we turn away?" The garden seemed to hush in that moment, waiting for their answer. The night was quiet except for the gentle trickle of the stream. Éloi lay awake, staring at the canopy of palms above. Stars glittered faintly between the leaves, but it was not the sky that held his attention. It was the sound, soft, faint, like whispers carried through the branches. He sat up, holding his breath. At first he thought it was the wind, but the longer he listened, the clearer it became. Words. Not in a language he fully understood, but words nonetheless. He glanced at Séraphine, who was curled beside the heartstone, asleep. Slowly, carefully, he rose and followed the whispers deeper into the grove. The air grew cooler as he walked, the flowers glowing faintly under the moonlight. The whispers swirled around him, pulling him forward until he reached a clearing he had not seen before. In its center stood a tree unlike the others, its trunk wide and pale, its branches rising like arms stretched toward the heavens. Silver leaves shimmered in the dark, glowing with their own soft light. The voices grew louder, weaving into a low hum that seemed to vibrate inside his chest. He stepped closer, placing his hand on the bark. Instantly, warmth spread through him and the whispers became clear. They spoke his name. Éloi stumbled back, his breath sharp. The tree's glow pulsed, like the slow beat of a heart. "Who are you?" he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he truly wanted an answer. The voices did not reply directly. Instead, they sang a melody filled with sorrow and hope, like a lullaby sung by countless mothers. It filled him with both peace and longing. His eyes burned with tears he did not understand. He sank to his knees, overwhelmed, clutching the earth as if it could steady him. For a moment, he felt smaller than he had ever been, yet strangely protected, as though the garden itself had wrapped him in an embrace. At dawn, Séraphine found him asleep at the base of the silver tree. She touched his shoulder gently, her voice worried. "Éloi, what happened?" He opened his eyes, still dazed, and told her everything. The whispers, the voices calling his name, the melody that had pierced his heart. She listened in silence, her hand never leaving his. When he finished, she looked toward the glowing leaves and whispered, "It has chosen you." Her words sank into him like a stone into water. "Chosen me? For what?" he asked. Her eyes shimmered with both wonder and fear. "For whatever comes next." They returned to the stream, silent but thoughtful. The heartstone pulsed faintly as if echoing the tree's rhythm. Éloi turned it in his palm, noticing how its glow brightened in his hand. He felt the weight of Séraphine's gaze and knew she saw it too. The garden was not simply alive, it was aware. And it was binding itself to him, drawing him deeper into its mysteries. As the sun climbed, spilling light into the canyon, Éloi realized the desert was no longer his home. His true journey had only just begun, and the garden itself was guiding his every step. The morning air shimmered with unusual stillness, as though the garden itself was waiting. Éloi felt it in his bones, the whispers of the silver tree still echoed in his mind. He and Séraphine moved carefully through the grove, each step guided by the invisible rhythm of the place. The heartstone in Éloi's palm warmed, pulsing with light whenever they approached certain paths. It was as if the garden wanted them to follow. They obeyed, though unease lingered. "It's leading us somewhere," Séraphine murmured, her fingers brushing the leaves as though asking permission. The plants bowed gently, clearing their way. The path narrowed, vines curling to form an arch overhead. The air grew heavy, rich with the fragrance of blooming jasmine. At its end, They emerged into a hollow unlike any they had seen. A pool glistened at its center, its waters so clear it mirrored the sky perfectly. Around it bloomed flowers of pure white, their petals trembling without wind. Éloi stepped forward and the water rippled, even though no stone had touched it. The reflection twisted, showing not his face but shadows of his past moments of loneliness, rejection, the endless days of wandering in the desert. He gasped, stumbling back. Séraphine caught his arm, her eyes wide. The pool shifted again, now showing her face, but not as she was it showed her as a child, reaching for hands that never reached back. She inhaled sharply, biting her lip. Tears welled in her eyes. "It's showing us our wounds," she whispered. Éloi felt a pressure on his chest, as though the garden demanded more than sight. Wanted honesty. The pool rippled once more, displaying both of them side by side, but their reflections were divided by a wide chasm. They could see each other but could not reach across. The meaning struck like lightning. Trust had not yet been proven. A deep hum rose from the pool, the same melody Éloi had heard from the silver tree. It grew louder, vibrating in his very bones until his knees buckled. He fell forward, clutching the earth. The water swirled faster, glowing with blinding light. A voice, not many this time, but one, filled the hollow. "To be bound to paradise, you must first be bound to each other." Éloi turned to Séraphine, heart pounding. Their eyes met, filled with fear and longing. Without speaking, he reached for her hand. She hesitated only a moment before gripping it tight. The chasm in the reflection shimmered, then slowly closed. When silence fell, the pool stilled. Their reflections now stood together, unbroken, surrounded by light. The garden sighed as though satisfied, the flowers blooming brighter, the water glowing softly. The heartstone in Eloi's hand shone more vividly than ever before. He knew now it was not simply a gift, but a responsibility. The garden had tested them, weighing their hearts. And for now it had accepted them. But Éloi could not shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, that the garden was not done testing the strength of their bond, nor the truth of their intentions. The day passed with a strange stillness, as though every leaf and stone had witnessed what happened at the pool. Éloi and Séraphine wandered deeper, guided by instinct more than sight. The vines seemed to move for them, opening passages where no path had been. The air shimmered with heat, yet within the garden it felt cool and alive. Every step echoed with something larger than themselves, a rhythm that tugged at their hearts. "It's calling us," Séraphine whispered, her voice barely more than breath. Éloi nodded, clutching the heartstone as its glow pulsed in time with his own heartbeat. They came upon a cavern hidden beneath a curtain of ivy. The entrance was narrow, yet the inside opened into a wide chamber lit by a glow that seemed to rise from the earth itself. At the center was not water nor stone, but a massive root thick as a house, its veins pulsing with light. It stretched into the ceiling and vanished, connecting the entire oasis like a living artery. The air hummed with power. Éloi approached, his legs trembling, and touched the root. In an instant, visions flooded his mind, deserts blooming with flowers, rivers carving through sand, children laughing under palm trees. A world healed. But then the visions shifted. He saw flames, smoke rising, strangers with greedy eyes hacking at trees, spilling lifeblood from roots. The oasis shriveled, the silver tree burned, and the heartstone dimmed into dust. Éloi staggered back, clutching his chest. The images vanished, but their weight remained. Séraphine caught him, her hands gripping his shoulders. "What did you see?" she asked urgently. His lips trembled as he answered, "A future, one of hope and one of ruin. The garden showed me both." Her face paled, but she nodded slowly as though she had expected nothing less. The cavern vibrated, the roots glow pulsing brighter, then softer, like a breath. A voice filled the chamber, calm and ageless. "The garden endures only as long as its keepers do. Betray it and it withers. Protect it, and it shall bloom beyond time." The words etched themselves into Eloi's very bones, a vow he could not forget. Séraphine pressed her hand against the root beside his, and together they felt the warmth spread between them, binding their lives to the pulse of the garden itself. It was no longer just a place. It was alive, ancient, and entrusted to them. As they left the cavern, Éloi felt a heaviness settle into his heart. The beauty of the garden was matched by the weight of its secret. He glanced at Séraphine, who walked quietly beside him, her eyes thoughtful, her hand brushing the vines as though to comfort them. He realized that finding paradise was not the end of his journey, it was the beginning of a burden. The desert beyond was vast, filled with people who would take, burn, and destroy if they knew what lay hidden here. For the first time, Éloi understood. Paradise was fragile, and it was now his duty to protect it. The days that followed carried an uneasy calm. Éloi and Séraphine tended to the garden as though it were a living child, watering the streams, clearing vines, listening to the hum of its roots. Yet beneath the beauty, Éloi felt something shifting. The air grew restless, the whispers of the silver tree sharper than before. One evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the canyon, Séraphine froze. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Éloi held still. At first, he heard nothing but the garden's breath. Then, faint and distant, came the sound of footsteps, heavy, uneven, echoing against stone. Panic flared in his chest. They had seen no other soul since stumbling into the oasis, yet now the sound was clear. They followed it to the edge of the grove, where the desert sand stretched pale and empty. There at the canyon's mouth stood a figure, cloaked, bent, carrying a staff. The stranger moved slowly as though weighed down by years, but their eyes, sharp and glinting, found Éloi and Séraphine immediately. The air thickened with silence. The figure raised a hand in greeting, but Éloi felt no comfort. Something in their presence gnawed at him, as if the desert itself had followed them inside. The stranger stepped closer, and the vines at the canyon wall shivered, tightening as though to block the way. This place, the voice was low, hoarse, but carried a strange authority. It should not exist, yet it does. Éloi tightened his grip on the hearthstone, its glow flaring in warning. Séraphine moved to his side, her eyes locked on the intruder. "Who are you?" she demanded. The stranger's smile was thin, almost sorrowful. "A seeker like you. But where you found paradise, I found ruin. I came not to harm, but to see if hope still breathes in this wasteland." His words felt both true and twisted. The garden reacted before Éloi could. The air stirred, leaves rustling, the silver tree glowing faintly as though in warning. The stranger's gaze flickered toward it, and a hunger lit their eyes, quick, sharp, impossible to hide. Eloi's heart sank. He knew that look. It was the same hunger he had seen in wanderers and raiders back in the desert. The hunger to claim, to own, to possess. He stepped forward, voice steady despite the fear twisting inside. "This place is not yours to take." The stranger tilted their head, studying him in silence, then chuckled softly. "We shall see, child. We shall see." That night, sleep would not come. Éloi lay awake, listening to the restless hum of the garden. Séraphine kept watch by the stream, her face pale in the moonlight. The stranger had not entered further, but their presence at the edge weighed heavy on them both. The garden had chosen them, tested them, bound them. But now, for the first time, Éloi realized the truth of what the root had shown him. Paradise was fragile, and shadows were already reaching for it. He closed his hand around the hearthstone and whispered to himself, "I will not let it fall." The dawn came heavy with silence. The stranger still lingered at the canyon's edge, seated upon a stone as though waiting for something unseen. Éloi rose early, the hearthstone glowing faintly in his hand. He knew the garden was holding its breath, watching what choice he would make. Séraphine joined him, her face solemn yet steady. "We cannot let them in," she whispered. Éloi nodded, though fear pressed against his ribs. The garden had shown him visions of ruin, and now the weight of its survival rested on his shoulders. As the sun climbed, the stranger stood and stepped forward. The vines at the canyon wall shivered but did not part. Their voice carried across the still air, "You cannot guard this place forever. One day others will come, stronger, hungrier. The garden will fall unless it belongs to." Eloi's heart wavered. The words held truth, yet the hunger in the stranger's eyes betrayed them. He stepped closer, holding the hearthstone aloft. "This place is not for greed. It is not for conquest. It is life itself, and it has chosen us to protect it." The stone blazed, filling the canyon with light. The stranger raised their staff, but the garden surged first. Roots erupted from the ground, vines snapping like whips, the silver tree glowing brighter than the sun. The air trembled, filled with a melody both fierce and tender. The same lullaby Éloi had heard at the beginning, now a song of defiance. The light struck the stranger, wrapping them in vines that glowed like fire. Their eyes widened, not in fear but in sorrow, as though they had expected this end. "Then keep it well," they whispered, before vanishing into dust that scattered on the wind. The vines withdrew, the canyon fell still, and the garden sighed in relief. Éloi fell to his knees, the hearthstone dimming back to a soft glow. Séraphine rushed to him, pulling him close. "It's over," she whispered, though her voice trembled. He looked at the silver tree, its branches shimmering with dawn's light, and knew she was right. But he also knew this was not the end. It was the beginning of a burden that would last their lifetimes. He pressed the heartstone to his chest and whispered an oath into the still air, "I will keep you safe. As long as I breathe, paradise will not fall." The tree's light pulsed gently as though sealing his vow. Together, he and Séraphine walked back to the stream, where the flowers bowed and the air was sweet with jasmine. They sat beside the water, listening to its endless song. The desert beyond was harsh, filled with greed and ruin, but here within the canyon bloomed a promise stronger than fear. Éloi took Séraphine's hand, feeling her warmth, and for the first time in years, his heart felt whole. The whispers of the garden wrapped around them both, not of warning this time, but of blessing. Paradise was theirs to keep, not as owners but as its chosen keepers. And with that, their lives had truly begun.